Hey, Soul Stories fam. We're starting a new love journey. Tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and join our family. Now stay with us. The story begins. The ballroom of the Riverside Grand Hotel glowed like a dream built of crystal and golden light. Massive crystal chandeliers hung high from the ceiling, tiny droplets of light cascading onto the marble floor, reflecting off gowns, champagne glasses, and the smiles of guests slowly drifting away to the final notes of the evening's music. Evelyn Moore stood at the center of it all, wrapped in an ivory wedding gown that hugged her body, feeling as though she still hadn't fully touched the ground. Her feet throbbed dully after a full day in high heels. Her cheeks felt tight from smiling too long. But her heart felt so full, it seemed as though one more beat might make it burst with happiness. She was married. She, Evelyn Moore, the woman who once lived in a small rented apartment on the south side of Chicago, who once believed that the best things in life only happened to other people, was now Mrs. Ashcroft. Nathan Ashcroft, her husband, stood near the bar, his black tuxedo perfectly tailored, his bow tie loosened. He looked as though he'd stepped straight off the cover of a magazine, tall, aloof, flawless in a way that made people hold their breath. When their eyes met across the vast space now growing emptier by the minute, Nathan smiled. That smile made Evelyn's heart tighten. Not from happiness, but from something fragile and fleeting, as though a door somewhere inside her had quietly closed. "You're just tired," Evelyn reassured herself. "Just tired." The bridal suite was on the top floor of the hotel. When the door closed behind them, the entire city of Chicago opened up through the floor-to-ceiling glass wall, streets ablaze with light, streams of cars like strands of sparkling beads, the September sky soft and endless. Red rose petals were scattered across the king-size bed. A bottle of champagne is chilled in a silver bucket. Golden light glowed, warm as honey. Everything was perfect. Evelyn slipped off her shoes, exhaled in relief, then let out a soft laugh. "I'm still not used to calling myself your wife," she said lightly. "Mrs. Ashcroft, it still feels unreal." Nathan didn't answer. He stood with his back to her, facing the city beyond the glass, his hands clasped tightly behind him. Evelyn felt the smile slowly leave her lips. "Nathan?" She stepped closer, the hem of her gown whispering across the floor. "What's wrong?" The silence stretched, not the gentle silence of a wedding night, but something dry and rigid, thickening the air until it was hard to breathe. When Nathan finally turned around, his face had changed. He was no longer the man who had exchanged vows in front of 200 guests, no longer a groom. His eyes were cold, neutral, like he was in an executive boardroom. "Evelyn," he said, just 2 syllables, yet her heart dropped straight through her chest. "We need to talk." 5 words, words that never came before anything good. She felt her hands grow cold. Her heart raced, her breath turning shallow. "What is it?" Evelyn asked, even as fear began creeping in. Nathan took a deep breath and spoke evenly, as if delivering a report. "I tried. I truly did. I thought I could do it. I thought I could love you, the way a husband should." The room seemed to tilt. "But I can't," Nathan continued. "I was wrong, and I don't want to continue a marriage built on self-deception." Evelyn gripped the back of a nearby chair. "What do you mean?" Her voice cracked. "Nathan, we just got married, just a few hours ago. I want a divorce." Evelyn's world stopped. "You... What did you say?" she whispered. "You're joking, right?" Nathan didn't answer with words. He walked to the desk by the window, opened a drawer and took out a neatly prepared folder. White paper, black print, cold and final. "I had my lawyer prepare the documents," he said. "I'll make sure you're fairly compensated." "Compensated?" The word struck like a blade. "Did I do something wrong?" Evelyn asked, tears starting to burn. "If something isn't right, we can talk about it. We can fix it." "There's nothing to fix," Nathan replied. "The problem isn't you." "Then what is it?" He hesitated for a second. Then he said the words that made Evelyn unable to stand any longer. "I love someone else." The space around her shattered. "Who is she?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely her own. "Isabella Laurent." The name needed no explanation. The international model, her face splashed across countless magazine covers, the woman Nathan had loved years ago. But she, She's already engaged, Evelyn whispered. Not anymore, Nathan said. She contacted me 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And he still stood at the altar, still held her hands, still kissed her as applause filled the room. Get out, Evelyn said quietly. Evelyn! Get out! This time she screamed. Get out of this room right now! Nathan didn't argue. He took his jacket and left, the door closing behind him with a sound so soft it felt cruel. Evelyn stood there for a few seconds. Then her knees gave way. She sank to the floor, her back against the bed, her wedding dress spread around her like melting snow no one bothered to clear away. There were no sobs and only a pain too deep, so deep that tears had nowhere left to go. Beyond the glass, the city was still bright. Cars kept moving. Life continued on. And Evelyn sat there in her wedding dress, realizing something she never thought she would have to learn on the very first night of her marriage. Some marriages end before the honeymoon even begins. Morning spilled into Evelyn Moore's small apartment in a pale, washed-out light, colder than she remembered. She stood in the narrow living room, still wearing the dress from yesterday, the dress she was supposed to take off tonight in a honeymoon suite, between quiet laughter and breathless kisses. Her suitcase sat by the door, the flight tag for a honeymoon that never began still attached. Nothing was opened, nothing was disturbed, just like her life. Evelyn set her purse on the table and slowly slipped off her wedding ring. White gold, cold, glittering with a kind of indifferent perfection. It hit the glass surface with a faint sound, barely a click, yet in the silence of the apartment, it echoed like a crack. She stared at it for a long time. Then they turned away. Lights flicked on. The kettle whistled. Evelyn made coffee like a program routine, her hands moving with steady precision, because if she stopped, everything might collapse. She didn't cry. Not because she was strong, but because the shock was too deep for tears to surface. When the doorbell rang, Evelyn didn't flinch. She already knew who it was. Rachel stood in the hallway, holding 2 cups of coffee and a bag of still-warm pastries. Her familiar curls were a little messy, and her eyes flared the second she saw Evelyn. "Where is he?" Rachel demanded without greeting. "Tell me where he is. I will—" "Rachel!" Evelyn's voice was unnervingly calm. "Come in." Rachel stepped inside, but when her eyes fell on the unopened suitcase, the dress from yesterday, the untouched apartment, like Evelyn had stepped out only for minutes, she fell silent. "Why are you—" Rachel choked. "Why are you here?" Evelyn took a sip of coffee. The bitterness slid down her throat, sharp and undeniable. "He asked for a divorce," she said, as if announcing the weather. "On our wedding night." Rachel slammed her cup onto the table. "What?" "He said he loves someone else." Evelyn stared ahead. "His ex. A model. The one everyone thinks is perfect for him." Rachel cursed, the words slicing through the air. She pulled Evelyn into a tight hug, too tight, as if afraid her friend might disappear. Evelyn stood still in her arms. No trembling, no tears, no response. "Are you okay?" Rachel whispered, voice cracking. "No," Evelyn answered, "but I'm still here." Rachel stepped back, searching Evelyn's terrifyingly composed face. "What are you going to do now?" Evelyn sat down and placed her hands on her thighs. Sunlight pooled across the wooden floor and stopped at the tip of her shoe. "I'll sign the papers," she said, "when they arrive." Rachel's eyes widened. "You're not going to talk to him? Ask why. Try to. No." One word, final. "I don't beg," Evelyn continued slowly, as if reminding herself. "I won't cling to a man who stood at the altar with me, while his heart was somewhere else." Rachel studied her for a long moment, then nodded, her eyes rimmed red. "You don't deserve this," she whispered. "I know," Evelyn replied, and for the first time, that truth didn't feel like a blade. The day drifted by like a block of fog. Evelyn cleaned the apartment, hung her wedding dress in the closet, and zipped it shut. Gently, without tears, without theatrics. Each time her fingers brushed the ivory silk, her heart tightened, but she refused to linger. By afternoon, her phone lit up with a message from Nathan. She didn't open it. By evening, 3 more arrived. She laid the phone face down. When night fell, Evelyn stood by the window, watching the city shift. The yellow streetlights cast their glow across her face. Thinner than yesterday, sharper somehow. Something in her gaze had changed, even if only slightly. She thought of the vows they spoke before hundreds of witnesses, of the way he held her hand, firm, steady, of the kiss on her lips, sincere enough to deceive a heart wide open. Then Evelyn whispered, so soft it felt like a vow of its own, I can't force someone to choose me. It wasn't surrender, it was freedom. She walked away from her marriage not because she was weak, but because she was strong enough to refuse being someone's second choice, to refuse to turn love into a negotiation, to refuse to become a woman waiting to be chosen. That night, for the first time in hours, Evelyn allowed herself to lie down. No one was beside her, no arms around her, no promises. But deep in her chest, something new began to beat, fragile, tentative, but hers. And somewhere between the lingering ache and the quiet enough to breathe, Evelyn understood. Some departures aren't losses. They're the first step back to oneself. The morning Evelyn returned to Hale & Rowe Creative, her hair still carried the faint scent of rain, along with the feeling that she was wearing a different skin, thinner, more alert. The old elevator rattled softly as it climbed to the 12th floor, red numbers ticking upward at an unhurried pace. I'm still here, she thought, keeping her breathing steady. The gray-carpeted hallway opened up, painfully familiar. The faint smell of burnt coffee, the hum of printers, the staccato rain of keyboard clicks. Some people looked up to greet her, others hesitated for half a beat, their eyes flicking briefly to her empty hand, where a ring used to be. Evelyn walked on at an even pace, shoulders straight. Don't lower your head. The desk by the window was exactly as she'd left it. Last summer's team photo, a black ink pen, a white ceramic mug. Only one thing was gone, the old version of herself. Evelyn sat down and powered up her computer. Her inbox overflowed with deadlines. She took a deep breath, letting the work hold her upright. You're back early, Martin across from her said quietly. The honeymoon? Canceled, Evelyn replied, offering a just enough smile. Let's catch up on the timeline. She turned away before kindness could harden into pity. Work crashed over her like a wave, relentless, heavy, salvational. She analyzed data, sharpened language, and adjusted color palettes until they were precise. Every email sent was a thread tying her to the present. Noon passed without warning. The cold sandwich barely got a proper chew. Send me the Riverside brief, Evelyn said to Leah when the clock hit 3. I have a new direction. Leah studied her for a moment, then nodded. I trust you. The words touched her, light but warm. As the sunset cast an orange glow across the glass, the office thinned out. Evelyn stayed. She liked this quiet, still enough to hear herself breathe, busy enough not to hear memory. When she finally left, the sky had deepened to purple. Her small apartment lit up as she opened the door. In the corner of the room, the wedding gifts were stacked neatly, ribbons intact, cards unopened. Each box held a blessing that never got the chance to live. Evelyn stood still. She didn't cry. There was only a heavy silence pressing against her chest. Her phone vibrated. One unread message, then another. She turned the screen face down. The night grew deeper. Evelyn sat at the small table by the window. A thin envelope lay waiting. Divorce papers, arriving faster than she'd expected. No flowery language. No explanations. Black type on white paper, as cold as the person who had placed it there. Evelyn picked up the pen. Her hand didn't shake. She read every line slowly as if reading the final contract of a chapter of life now closed. There was no clause about love, no line that mentioned vows. Only dates, signatures, and an ending already stamped in place. When the pen touched the page, she paused for exactly one beat, not to hope, but to be certain. Then she signed her name. Evelyn Moore. The ink dried with brutal speed. She folded the papers, slipped them into the envelope, and stood up. No drama, no tears. Just a decision made with clarity she had just reclaimed. Evelyn turned to the corner of the room, opened the closet, and pulled out a large plastic storage bin. She began packing the gifts. Engraved crystal glasses, a tablecloth embroidered with both their names, a six-piece dinnerware set. She folded carefully, wrapped each item as if putting away old versions of herself. When the last box was placed inside, she closed the lid and slid it into the darkest corner of the closet, not to deny it, but to keep the past from occupying space meant for the present. Evelyn returned to the living room and switched on the warm yellow light. She opened her laptop and replied to a work email. Her fingers were steady. Her worth was no longer tied to whether someone stayed or left. Before bed, she opened one small box that remained. Inside were two crystal glasses engraved with E and N. She placed one on a high shelf and wrapped the other. No smashing, no theatrics, just a quiet decision. In the bathroom, she stood before the mirror and let her hair fall loose over her shoulders. Her eyes were red with exhaustion, but within them was something new, clear, sharp. Evelyn placed a hand over her chest. Her heartbeat was no longer frantic. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "I'll do better than today." Outside, the city didn't sleep. Inside, Evelyn signed a new agreement with life. Not loudly, just firmly. She returned to herself in very small steps. An email sent on time, an idea defended all the way, an evening not spent waiting for a message that would never come. Among the wedding gifts now put away, beneath warm lamplight and a steady heartbeat, Evelyn understood something at last. Some beginnings don't arrive with weddings. They arrive with a return. 2 months later, autumn had already settled over Chicago with a softer, gentler light, as if the city itself had learned how to slow down. Leaves were turning along long streets. The wind carried that familiar metallic scent of the river and faraway rain. Evelyn Moore sat alone in her usual corner at Hale and Rowe Creative, in front of a bright white computer screen, briefs stacked like bricks holding her upright. 2 months. Long enough for the pain to retreat from the center of her thoughts, but not long enough for it to become a harmless memory. Long enough for her to work better, sleep easier, breathe deeper. Long enough for the wedding ring to lie quietly in a drawer without making her hands shake every time she opened it. The email arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, just as sunlight angled through the glass, slanting across her desk like a tilted band of gold. From Human Resources, Ashcroft Group. Subject, interview invitation. Senior Marketing Director. Evelyn paused mid-sentence. The cursor blinked. Her heart stuttered, barely noticeable but enough to blur every sound around her. The name sat there, neat and emotionless, yet carrying a past she had folded away with painstaking care. Ashcroft Group, her ex-husband's company. She didn't open the email right away. Evelyn closed her eyes, inhaled, then exhaled slowly. Over the past 2 months, she had learned to place distance between herself and anything capable of shaking her. Flipping her phone face down, packing wedding gifts into boxes. She signed her name without hesitation. Distance saves people. "Evelyn," Leah called from the next desk. "You okay?" "Yeah," she answered, her voice so normal it was convincing. "Just weighing a subject line." Leah grinned and turned back to her screen. The office sounds resumed, keys clicking, paper shuffling, coffee cups landing softly on wood. Evelyn opened the email. Short, polite, professional. "We have reviewed your profile. We would like to invite you to interview for the Senior Marketing Director position. Location, headquarters, flexible timing. Signed by Derek Stone, Chief Executive Officer." Evelyn read the name 3 times. Chief Executive Officer. Nathan used to be CEO. Used to. A cold line slid down her spine. Not pain, but clarity. She opened her browser and typed fast. The news appeared clean and factual. Ashcroft Group appoints new CEO after internal restructuring. Nathan steps back from daily operations, retains shares, no longer holds executive power. Evelyn leaned back. She let out a quiet, humorless chuckle. Not bitter, just an acknowledgement. The world keeps spinning, even when someone's heart breaks. Senior Marketing Director. 3 rungs above her current role. A different league of responsibility and influence. An opportunity, undeniably an opportunity, but also a front door leading straight into memories not yet faded. Her phone buzzed. "Rachel, what are we eating tonight?" Evelyn stared at the screen, then typed, "Come over, I've got something." That evening, her apartment glowed warm. Rachel sat on the sofa, hugging the same throw pillow she always claimed, listening as Evelyn read the email aloud. Rachel's eyes widened. "No," she declared the moment Evelyn finished. "Absolutely not. This is the most perfectly disguised trap I've ever heard of." "It's HR," Evelyn replied. "His name isn't there. His presence is. That's enough." Evelyn stayed quiet. Outside the window, streetlights flicked on in staggered lines, the city moving with a kind of indifferent urgency. For 2 months, she'd worked relentlessly, stitching peace back into her life one quiet thread at a time. She was not about to let someone unravel it. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone," Rachel softened. "You're doing fine." "I know," Evelyn nodded. "But if I walk away from this because of him, then he's still deciding my life." Silence settled. Rachel watched her for a long moment, then sighed. "So what are you going to do?" Evelyn walked to her desk and opened her laptop. The email appeared again. Simple, straightforward, a door waiting to be chosen. She placed her fingers on the keyboard. In her mind, one sentence rose. Not a challenge, but a compass. "He doesn't get to decide my life." She selected a date, confirmed a time, sent her reply with a single, steady click. Her heart beat faster, not with fear, but with the electricity of a timely decision. Rachel smiled, half worried, half proud. "If you walk into that building, who are you walking in as?" "As Evelyn Moore," she answered, "not someone's ex-wife." That night, Evelyn hung her coat neatly and brewed a cup of tea. She opened her closet, glanced at the box of wedding gifts sitting quietly in the dark corner, then shut the door. No need to touch it. No need to prove anything. She stepped to the mirror, smoothed her hair, and tested a smile. Not a surviving smile, but a ready one. The city reflected in her eyes was bright and vast. The interview date was set, not to go back, but to move forward unapologetically. And this time, Evelyn didn't open the email out of curiosity. She opened it because she was ready. The Ashcroft Group Tower rose in the heart of downtown Chicago, like a proud structure of glass and steel, reflecting the pale blue sky of early fall. As Evelyn Moore stepped through the revolving door, a wave of cool, clean air scented with modern metal enveloped her, a feeling familiar to power, yet foreign to memory. She wore a tailored navy suit, its clean lines making her feel protected. Her heels tapped lightly against the marble floor, each step measured and steady. Every beat was a reminder, "I'm here for work." The reception desk gleamed, a professional smile. A visitor badge was printed quickly and slid across the counter. "Elevators at the end of the hall. 32nd floor," the assistant said. "Mr. Wright is expecting you." Mr. Wright, not Ashcroft. Evelyn stepped into the elevator. The doors closed with a soft exhale. The mirrored wall reflected her face calm, focused, her eyes brighter than she remembered. She reviewed the key points of her portfolio in her mind. Campaigns, growth metrics, decisions paid for with late nights and strong coffee. The 32nd floor opened into a flood of light. Floor-to-ceiling glass, the city stretched out like a living map. The assistant led her into a small minimalist conference room, quiet, with the scent of new wood, a long table, 2 chairs facing each other. No show, no display of power. The door opened. Caleb Wright walked in. If Nathan had commanded attention with his flawless sharpness, Caleb made people pause because of his calm. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a simple charcoal suit, just enough not to dominate. Warm brown eyes that met hers directly. No probing, no calculation. When he smiled, faint lines appeared at the corners of his eyes, unmistakably real. "Evelyn Moore," he said, his voice low, warm, unhurried. "Thank you for coming." His handshake was firm, neither too tight nor too long. Respect, expressed through the smallest details. "Shall we begin?" Caleb asked once they were seated. There were no winding opening questions, no unnecessary small talk. He opened a tablet, then set it aside, his eyes still on her. "I've reviewed your portfolio," he said. "The Riverside campaign, shifting the focus from price to experience. That was a bold decision." Evelyn leaned forward slightly. "When budgets are tightened, What does a brand still have to keep customers? Experience is harder to copy. Caleb nodded. He didn't take notes. He listened. The conversation flowed naturally like two colleagues dissecting a difficult problem. He asked deeply why she chose that approach, what she sacrificed, what lessons she took away. Each question opened a door, never boxed in the answer. Not once did he mention the wedding, not a single curious glance, not a question that touched the past the press had once made so loud. Here, Evelyn was simply Evelyn, the professional. When a campaign misses its KPI, what do? Caleb asked. I take responsibility, she answered. Then I ask what my team missed. Failure is data, if you're brave enough to read it. Caleb smiled. This time the smile reached his eyes. Making people less afraid of being wrong, he said. That's the mark of a leader. Evelyn felt warmth spread through her chest, not from praise but from being seen. The final hour of the interview arrived sooner than she expected. Caleb stood, walked to the glass wall, studied the city for a moment, then turned back. I need someone who isn't afraid to challenge the status quo, he said. Someone who cares about the work, not the reputation. Ashcroft Group is restructuring. I want fresh, practical, and honest. And you think that's me, Evelyn said, not a question. I know it is. He opened a desk drawer and handed her a slim folder. Senior Marketing Director, Caleb said. Double your current salary. Authority to build your own team. A direct voice in strategic decisions. The air seemed to be still. Evelyn took the folder. The papers had just enough weight to them, like an offer that mattered. She didn't open it right away. She looked up. You're not concerned about my history with this company? She asked plainly. Caleb met her gaze, calm and steady. I'm only concerned with the present and what you bring to the table. Your past isn't in the job description. A moment of silence passed. Clean, complete, enough for the decision to be fully felt. When do you need an answer? Evelyn asked, keeping her voice even. By the weekend, Caleb replied, but I hope it's yes. Evelyn stood. The second handshake carried the same respect as the first, as if both understood that what mattered most had already been said, not in words, but in how they regarded each other. When she stepped outside the building, the fall wind brushed her cheeks, cool and clarifying. The city seemed to widen just a little. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Rachel. So? Evelyn smiled, looking up at the towering glass building. He's not like the old one, she texted, and the job is real. She walked on, shoulders straight, her heartbeat steady. This meeting wasn't a miracle, it was a door. And for the first time in a long while, Evelyn stepped toward it, without armor, without blind hope, carrying only her own ability, with a CEO she never expected. On the day Evelyn Moore officially joined Ashcroft Group, Chicago wore a sky so clear it felt cold. Sunlight bounced off the glass towers like thousands of silent eyes tracking her every step as she pushed through the familiar revolving doors, familiar enough to make her heartbeat falter. The old world, she thought, but not the old me. The 32nd floor hallway opened into a realm of distilled power, charcoal gray carpeting, transparent glass walls, and the brisk steps of people who looked busy and absolutely certain of themselves. Conversations were subdued, glances were swift, measuring, precise, emotionless. Evelyn felt the loneliness immediately. No one here knew her, and those who did knew far too much. She was led to her office, spacious, bright, facing the river. A dark wooden desk, leather chair, empty bookshelves waiting to be claimed. Everything was new, and none of it was hers yet. Evelyn set her bag down and took a deep breath. The space did not welcome her, but it didn't reject her either. It waited, for her to prove she deserved it. The first meeting started at 9. Large conference room, long table, 12 chairs. The people seated around it were older, more seasoned, their eyes carrying a question they didn't bother to voice. Was she here for her talent or because of the name Ashcroft? Evelyn sat straight, hands resting lightly on her documents. She knew this look. She just didn't let it shrink her anymore. The door opened. Caleb Wright walked in. No fanfare, no theatrics. His presence alone recalibrated the room. He took the seat at the head of the table, gaze sweeping across the group, calm, assured. "Let's begin," he said. Then he turned to Evelyn. "Before we go into the agenda," Caleb continued, voice steady, "I'd like to introduce Evelyn Moore, our new senior marketing director." A few nods, a few guarded glances. "Evelyn is not here to fill a title," Caleb said. "She's here to redefine how we speak to the market." The atmosphere shifted, subtly, unmistakably. "Starting today," he added, "every marketing strategy runs through Evelyn's desk. I expect full cooperation, not because I say so, but because the results will prove this is the right call." He paused, eyes locking onto an older manager seated to his right. "And if anyone has concerns," Caleb said calmly, "bring them to me. This decision is mine." Silence. Evelyn felt her throat tighten, not from nerves, but from something unfamiliar, almost dizzying. Trust, public, unconditional, undisguised. The meeting continued. Evelyn presented her market analysis, pointed out stagnation in old approaches, proposed a new direction. There was pushback, skepticism, but she kept her tone even, her reasoning sharp. No defensiveness, no apologies. Caleb didn't interfere. He listened. And when he spoke, he asked only one question, precise enough to unlock a path without stealing her place on it. When the meeting ended, the room dissolved into departing footsteps, quieter than when they'd arrived. Leah, the communications manager, lingered near Evelyn's chair. "Your analysis was really solid," Leah said, pausing just a beat too long. "If you need additional data, I can send it." Evelyn smiled. "Thank you." Not acceptance, but a beginning. The following days flew by, dense and electric. Emails stacked, reports multiplied. Numbers told the truth no one could argue with. Evelyn stayed late. She learned every name on her team. She listened more than she spoke. She didn't try to belong. She let her work answer for her. Caleb appeared when needed, disappeared when he should. One evening, while Evelyn was dissecting an old campaign for the third time, a soft knock landed on her door. "Go home," Caleb said, leaning against the frame. "You don't have to prove the entire world wrong." Evelyn let out a faint laugh. "I'm not proving anything. I'm just working." His gaze lingered a moment, warm and grounded. "That's exactly why I chose you." It wasn't romantic, but it hit her somewhere deeper than romance ever had. The first week ended with a short strategy session. As the room emptied, Caleb turned to her. "I want you to lead our biggest repositioning project this quarter," he said. "Full authority." A few murmurs, a few surprised stares. Evelyn nodded. "I'll take it." When the room finally cleared, she stayed in her chair, staring at the city outside. Vast, cold, but no longer foreign. For the first time, she didn't feel like the abandoned wife walking into this world. She was a woman chosen, not because of her past, but because of the present she was creating. And in that powerful, lonely space, Evelyn realized something that softened her chest. Some places aren't meant for us at the start. We build our belonging with our own ability. And this time, she wasn't building it alone. The work began to move, no longer cautious, measured steps, but a forward surge, fast, sharp, demanding every ounce of Evelyn Moore's focus. Campaigns came one after another like waves crashing against the shore. And this time, she didn't step aside. She walked straight into the heart of the surge. Ashcroft Group's first repositioning campaign took off, truly exploded. The numbers spiked within the first 36 hours. Calls poured in from partners. The board demanded reports ahead of schedule. The 32nd floor office was wound tight as a drawn wire. Evelyn stood at the center of the conference room, the blue glow of the screen casting light across her face, focused, sharp, without a trace of hesitation. "We're winning," she said, pointing to the chart. "But if we get complacent too early, we'll lose our edge within 6 weeks." A senior director pushed back. "You're proposing a budget increase while things are going well?" "No," Evelyn replied, her voice steady but firm. "I'm proposing we get one step ahead of the market before our competitors understand what we're doing." The air compressed. All eyes turned to Caleb Wright. He didn't speak right away. Caleb leaned back in his chair, fingers loosely interlaced, his gaze calm but deep. as though he were weighing the entire room in his mind. His silence wasn't hesitation. It was control. "Evelyn," he said slowly, "if you're wrong, what's the risk?" She met his eyes directly. No evasion, no softening. "If I'm wrong," she said, "the responsibility is mine. But if we don't act, the cost is our position." A few people drew in sharp breaths. Caleb held her gaze for one more beat. Long, heavy, enough for everyone to understand this was no longer a presentation. This was a test. "Do it," Caleb said. "Follow her proposal." The room stirred. "And Evelyn," he added without looking away from her, "I want weekly reports. No sugarcoating. No risk hidden." "You'll have them," she replied without a second's hesitation. That was the first moment Evelyn clearly felt something different. Caleb wasn't protecting her out of sentiment. He was backing her, publicly. The pace turned brutal. Morning meetings, midday pushback, late-night adjustments, emails sent past midnight, cold coffee, lights that never went off. Evelyn led her team with cold precision, but beneath it burned a low, steady fire. Not to prove herself, but to be worthy. Caleb was always present at the edges of every critical moment, never taking center stage, never overshadowing. He listened when she spoke, paused meetings when someone cut her off, asked questions at exactly the right point, forcing others to go deeper instead of circling. Once, in a tense argument with the finance department, Evelyn nearly slammed her hand on the table. "You're looking at this campaign as a cost line," she said tightly. "I'm looking at it as the nervous system of the brand." The response was sharp and aggressive. Caleb stepped in, not raising his voice but landing with enough weight to still the room. "Listen to her," he said, "then argue the idea, not the tone." The room went silent. Evelyn turned to look at him. For one, very brief, very dangerous. Second, she felt her heart slip out of rhythm. Not because she'd been rescued, but because she'd been given unconditional respect. Between them, something tense and heated took shape. The chemistry of two equal minds. No touching, no innuendo. But every debate sparked. "You're being too cautious," Evelyn said during a private meeting. "And you're pushing too far," Caleb countered. "Because I see something you're not ready to see," she shot back. Caleb stepped closer, stopping just near enough to feel her breath, and no closer. "Then show me," he said. Neither of them backed down. They looked at each other, not as a man and a woman, but as two people who knew that if they aligned correctly, they would change the game. Evelyn presented, fast, direct, sharp. Caleb listened to the end, then nodded. "Convincing," he said. "We'll do it." No praise, no celebration, but in his eyes there was a very clear spark. And then, Caleb held the line. He didn't call unnecessarily after hours. He didn't overstep physically. He didn't let his gaze drift where it shouldn't. Once, after a meeting so tense it left the air suffocating, they stood in the empty office, the city outside blazing like fire. Evelyn began. Caleb lifted a hand just slightly. He didn't touch her. "Evelyn," he said, his voice lower, "I need to say this once. Clearly." She looked at him, her heart pounding. "Here," he said, "I will not let anything, especially emotions, blur your capability. If one day things change, it will be when you are completely ready." No invitation, no suggestion, just a statement, disciplined and controlled. And that restraint made the air between them hotter than any action could have. The campaign ended with results far beyond expectations. Evelyn's name appeared in internal reports more than anyone else's. The team looked at her with real trust now. No whispers, no doubt. One late evening, Caleb stood at the door of her office. "You pulled the entire company forward," he said. "Not everyone can do that." Evelyn stood, placing both hands on her desk, her voice low but steady. "You gave me the space to do it." A moment of silence, heavy, meaningful. Caleb nodded. "Because you deserved it." Then he left. Evelyn remained alone, her heart still pounding, her blood still warm beneath her skin. Not because of love, but because, for the first time in her life, she was in a space where her talent set the rhythm others had to follow. And there was a man who stood steady, waiting for exactly the right moment to support her, to trust her. 1 year later, Chicago stepped into late spring with light as sharp and straight as a blade. From her corner office on the 32nd floor, Evelyn Moore looked out over the city, no longer as a battlefield to conquer, but as a system she now held in her hands. 1 year, 9 major campaigns, 3 brand repositionings, a marketing department rebuilt from the ground up. Her name appeared in board reports as a marker, a consistent growth factor. No more whispers, no more doubt, only results. Evelyn stepped out of the small conference room, documents neatly in hand. She knew where she was going, knew what people needed from her, and, most importantly, knew what no longer had permission to touch her. That voice carried down the hallway. Low, familiar, once the center of her universe. Evelyn slowed. Nathan Ashcroft stood near the lounge area, speaking with a board member. His suit was still impeccable, his demeanor still polished, but his place had shifted. No longer the one who led, only the one who was invited. When he turned and saw her, his first reaction wasn't confidence, it was hesitation. Evelyn caught it instantly, and her heart didn't move an inch. So this was what it felt like when the past no longer had power. Evelyn, Nathan called. She turned, calm, steady, unarmored. Hello, Nathan, she replied. No titles, no lingering intimacy. He inhaled as though he needed to recalibrate. I've heard you've done a lot here. Yes, she said, and I have another meeting today. Nathan repeated that word in his mind like the faint sting of a cut. Could we talk? He asked quietly. No insistence, no familiarity. Evelyn considered for exactly 1 second, not out of fear, but out of respect for her own time. 5 minutes, and she said, Here. They stood in the glass corridor, where the light allowed no one to hide. Nathan looked at her more closely, not at her clothes, not at her posture, at her presence. She no longer walked lightly to avoid disturbing others. She stood firm, like someone who knew she belonged. I've been following what you've done, Nathan said, restructuring the marketing division, connecting fragmented teams, market share, rising. Evelyn nodded. The team did well. He gave a quiet, strained laugh. You always share the credit. Because it's true. Silence. Long enough for Nathan to realize what he had lost wasn't a chance to return, but the right to stand as her equal in this conversation. I was wrong, Nathan said. No excuses. I underestimated you. No, Evelyn replied, voice gentle but sharp. You judged the old version of me correctly. She doesn't exist anymore. The words fell between them. Final. Nathan swallowed. I didn't think 1 year could change so much. Evelyn held his gaze, without anger, without pain. Only truth. I did, she said, because I worked for this every single day. In the large boardroom minutes later, Caleb Wright entered right on time. When he saw Evelyn, he nodded, a recognition that needed no explanation. The board sat straighter. Nathan sat at the far end of the table. No one said it. Everyone knew where the center was. Evelyn presented the quarterly strategy, concise, incisive, assured. When she finished, Caleb said only, proceed with Evelyn's proposal. No further discussion. Nathan watched, an outsider to a life that could have been his. And then he understood the tightening in his chest. He didn't lose a wife. He lost the woman who could have become his strongest ally. After the meeting, Evelyn gathered her documents. Nathan rose, hesitant. Evelyn, he said, if I could go back. She turned. Her eyes were clear enough to end every unfinished sentence. There is no if, she said. There are choices, and their consequences. Nathan nodded slowly. I wish you happiness. Evelyn smiled, a real smile, light as air. I already am. She walked away, not in victory, not in revenge, simply as a woman who had moved beyond the reach of her past. And behind her, Nathan Ashcroft finally understood. Some people don't need to leave you. They simply grow until you can't reach them anymore. Ashcroft Group's year-end gala arrived softly, like the season's first snowfall. The grand ground floor hall was dressed in warm golden light, slender strings of bulbs draped across the high ceiling, like constellations drawn closer to Earth. Smooth jazz flowed beneath the low murmur of conversation. Crystal glasses clinked gently. Polite smiles appeared. Handshakes carried the weight of a long year brought to a close. Evelyn entered in a midnight blue silk dress that traced her silhouette with restraint. Nothing showy, nothing elaborate. Yet when she appeared, the room's rhythm subtly shifted. She was used to it now. Position, results, presence. This kind of light no longer overwhelmed her. Evelyn, Caleb called her name from the hallway. He wore a classic black suit, a simple tie, his posture calm and grounded. Not the kind of elegance that demanded attention at first glance, but the kind of steadiness that made people linger. He inclined his head slightly, his smile barely there. "You made it." "You invited me," she replied lightly, accepting the champagne flute he handed her. They stood side by side, not too close, not too distant, a familiar space that had become an unspoken agreement. Work conversations came and went. Colleagues stopped to greet them, to praise the campaigns, to congratulate them on the completed restructuring. Caleb introduced Evelyn by her exact title, with the exact weight it deserved, no more, no less. As the crowd thinned, the music slid into a slower tempo. Caleb leaned in and spoke softly. "Would you like to step onto the balcony for a moment? It's quieter out there." Outside, the cold was just enough to sharpen the senses. The city blazed beneath them, streets of light forming a living map. Their breath misted faintly. Evelyn rested her hands on the railing, feeling the cold metal against her skin. "This year it went by fast," she said. "Because you pulled it forward," Caleb replied, "in the best possible way." Evelyn turned to him. The lights behind them traced a thin line along his profile. There was something different in his silence. No tension, only focus. "Evelyn," Caleb said slowly, "there's something I want to say to you. Not as CEO." She held her breath for a brief moment. Then as Caleb. The honesty of it made the air tremble slightly. Not abruptly, not forcefully, just enough to center the moment. "I've spent the past year asking myself," he continued, "whether I should say this or not. Not because I was afraid, but because I respect what you've been through." Evelyn looked out at the city, then back at him. "So why today?" "Because today," he said, "you're no longer rebuilding from ruins. You're standing steady, and I don't want this distance to remain silence forever." He didn't step closer, didn't touch her. He only spoke. "I have feelings for you," Caleb said. "Feelings that don't make me want to rush. Don't make me want to take anything from you. They only make me want to choose the right way." A breeze swept across the balcony. Evelyn felt her heartbeat clearly, almost audibly. Not the sweet, reckless flutter from before, but a grown, deliberate alertness. She rotated the champagne glass in her hand. "I'm afraid," she said honestly. "Not of you, of the pattern. Promises that come too fast, emotions that outrun reason." Caleb nodded. "I'm afraid too," he said. "If I'd spoken sooner, I might have made things harder for you." "And now?" "Now," he replied, his gaze steady, "I want you to know the truth. No request, no expectation. If you say no, I'll stay right here, with the same respect." Silence settled between them. Not heavy, but considered. Evelyn set her glass down on the railing, folding her hands together. She thought of the year behind her, the nights when the lights never went off, the meetings tight with tension, the victories earned through sweat, and a man who had always stood exactly where he should. "Caleb," she said slowly and firmly, "I don't want to start again with long strides." He smiled just slightly. "Then we walk in small steps." "I need boundaries," she said, "and time." "You have both," he answered immediately. Evelyn nodded. She didn't say yes the old way. She said it the present way, clear, self-sustaining. "We try," she said, slowly. Caleb exhaled, light, as if setting something heavy down. "Slowly," he repeated. They returned to the hall. The music changed. Someone laughed loudly. The party went on as if nothing had shifted. But for Evelyn, something had, not the foundation, but how she stood upon it. As they separated to greet colleagues, Caleb leaned in and murmured, "Thank you for trusting me." Evelyn smiled. "Not yet," she said, "for not rushing." Outside, snow began to fall. Small, patient flakes, quiet and persistent. And Evelyn understood. Some feelings don't need to blaze to bring warmth. They only need to be real and slow enough to stay. The Riverside Grand Ballroom opened up in a wave of light. Crystal chandeliers hung above like frozen rain, each drop of brilliance falling onto the marble floor, reflecting off evening gowns, tuxedos, and champagne glasses gently clinking. The orchestra played softly, elegantly, slowing every step, making each movement feel deliberate, ceremonial. Evelyn Moore paused at the threshold for one single beat. She didn't need to look closely to know where she was. This place had once been the beginning of the worst mistake of her life. And now, it was where she returned, not to confront pain, but to choose. "You all right?" Caleb Wright asked quietly beside her. Evelyn inhaled, exhaled, then nodded. "I'm fine." Caleb bent his arm slightly, waiting. He didn't pull, didn't urge. Evelyn stepped forward half a pace and slipped her arm into his. The moment was small, but heavier than all the lights overhead. They entered. Evelyn's gown was ivory with a hint of silver, soft and fitted, no resemblance to the wedding dress of years past. Not pure white begging for a future, not extravagant in desperation, just a woman standing in the light she owned. Caleb in a black tuxedo, sharp collar, composed presence. They made no spectacle, yet every gaze adjusted itself to their pace. Compliments murmured, greetings exchanged, subtle nods of acknowledgement. Ashcroft Group had just completed a brilliant year of restructuring. Evelyn, at its epicenter. Then she saw him. Nathan Ashcroft stood near the champagne bar, alone. No Isabella, no familiar shadow, no reassuring arm to rest his confidence on. His perfect gray suit couldn't hide the awkwardness in his stance, like a man accustomed to having someone beside him who now had to relearn solitude. His eyes swept the room and froze when they found Evelyn. He was the one who still thought this place was the same. Evelyn knew better. She felt his gaze thin with jealousy, sharp with regret. Not the power that once pressed down on her, but a feeling imploding back onto itself. Evelyn didn't turn away. She didn't meet it head-on either. She simply walked forward as if the path ahead was all that mattered. A sponsor greeted her. A photographer smiled, requesting a picture. Caleb stood half a step behind, close enough to bolster, never close enough to overshadow. He left the center to Evelyn. Let the light belong to her. When the first waltz began, Caleb tilted his head. "Would you like to?" he asked. No assumption, no hurry. Evelyn nodded. The dance floor opened beneath them. The music drifted slow, measured. Caleb placed one hand on her back right behind her, not lower, not possessive. A silent guardrail. Evelyn laid her hand on his shoulder, steadying against a quiet strength. They moved. Not for show, not to impress, simply two people who had learned how to listen to each other's rhythm. Evelyn felt the difference unmistakably. No anxious flutter, no fear of abandonment, just a mature steadiness, warm enough to breathe in. At the edge of the floor, Nathan saw everything. He remembered that day, this same melody, this same marble floor. Evelyn trembling slightly when she put her hand in his. Back then, he had assumed it was happiness shaking her. Watching her now, poised in another man's arms, he understood. It had been fear, a fear she no longer carried. Nathan emptied his champagne. It tasted like nothing. When the music ended, Caleb led Evelyn back toward their table. Just then, Nathan approached. No smile, no banter, just a man arriving late to his own realization. "Evelyn," he said. She turned, her eyes calm as a lake after rain. "Nathan." Caleb stood beside her, neither stepping forward nor withdrawing. His hand rested at her back, so faint only she could feel it, but enough for the room to understand. "I didn't know you would be here," Nathan said, voice lower than usual. "You did," Evelyn replied. "This place belongs to the city." A boundary drawn, thin, sharp. Nathan nodded, then looked toward Caleb. "Hello." "Hello," Caleb answered, polite, even, not a contest. A brief silence. Nathan inhaled. You look, well, he said to Evelyn. Better than before. I think so too, she replied. No venom, no triumph, just truth placed cleanly on the table. Nathan looked at them, Evelyn's hand resting naturally at Caleb's side, her posture balanced, her eyes no longer searching. Something inside him broke, quietly, without spectacle. I was wrong, he said, about many things. Evelyn met his gaze and shook her head gently. You chose, and I chose too. Caleb said nothing, his hand pressed ever so slightly at her back, a signal she didn't need saving from, only support with. Nathan swallowed. I broke up, he said. We're done. Evelyn smiled. I'm sorry to hear that. Nathan stepped back, alone again. Music rose once more. As he walked away, Evelyn breathed out, lightly, not because something ended, but because something released. You okay? Caleb asked softly. Very, she answered. Thank you. For what? For not stepping in front of me, Evelyn said, and for not letting me stand alone. Caleb tilted his head, warmth in his eyes. That's the right choice. They returned to the dance floor, this time away from everyone's sight, just the two of them and a steady rhythm. Caleb's hand stayed where it had always been tonight, behind her, guarding, respecting, silent. In the place where she once fell apart, Evelyn stood strong. In the place where a marriage ended before it even began, she started over. Not with vows, not with fireworks, but with a clear choice. Beneath the crystal lights, beneath the song that once shattered her heart, Evelyn finally understood. Not everyone who walks into your life is destiny. Only the one who stands in the right place, anchors the right moment, and waits for the right tempo is the one you choose when you finally know what you deserve. Nathan sought Evelyn out on an early summer afternoon when Chicago sunlight slanted across the buildings like sharp ribbons of silk. She was at the office, not the old room where she once had to ask permission to be heard, but a space now familiar with her own breathing. On her desk lay the strategic plan for the next quarter. Key figures circled in blue ink. Her phone vibrated. The assistant announced an unscheduled visitor. It's Nathan Ashcroft, the young woman said, hesitating slightly. Evelyn paused for a beat. She wasn't surprised, nor did she tense up. Let him in, she said. Nathan stepped inside and closed the door behind him. No expensive suit, no confident smile, just a man carrying something heavy in his eyes, as if the city itself had drained of sound, leaving him in an echoing hollow. Thank you for seeing me, Nathan said, remaining standing. You have 10 minutes, Evelyn replied, polite in a way no one could push past. Nathan nodded. He glanced around. The orderly desk, the internal awards mounted on the wall, the window opening to river and sky. This was a space that required no man's validation. I've been watching, Nathan said slowly, how you've built everything here. What you've done, it's what I once thought I would do. Evelyn leaned back in her chair. Then I'm glad for you that you've had time to observe. He closed his eyes for a second, then opened them. I was wrong, Evelyn. Not just once. I was wrong from the moment I thought I could walk away, then come back, and everything would still be there. She didn't argue, not because she agreed, but because there was no need. Isabella and I, it ended, Nathan continued, a long time ago. Evelyn nodded faintly. I know. He stiffened slightly. You? No. News always travels faster than feelings, she said, and your life is no longer a priority for me. Nathan drew a deeper breath. I'm not saying this to beg, he said quietly. I'm saying it to be honest. I love you. I always loved you. I just realized it too late. Those words, once capable of bringing her to her knees, now passed like a draft between two glass walls. Nathan, Evelyn said calmly, you love the old version of me? He frowned. No. You love the woman who placed you at the center of her world, she continued without anger, without edge. The woman who believed that if she tried a little harder, stayed quiet a little longer, sacrificed a little more, she would be chosen. She stood, keeping the desk between them. like a visible boundary. She no longer exists, Evelyn said clearly. I no longer live to be chosen last. I choose myself from the beginning. Nathan took half a step forward, then stopped. I could do things differently. I could. No, Evelyn cut in, her voice calm but firm. There is no differently. There are only the choices already made, and the people we become afterward. He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rougher. I don't expect forgiveness. I just didn't want to be the man who watched you walk away without saying anything. Evelyn looked at him, carefully. There was no pain left, no anger, only a clarity gentle in its certainty. You didn't lose me, she said. You missed the chance to grow alongside me. Nathan pressed his lips together. His eyes reddened, but no tears fell. So, do I have any place left in your life? Evelyn shook her head very slightly. No. Not cruel, not arrogant, just clean truth. If you need a complete answer, she added, here it is. I am not anyone's fallback plan, not when they fail, not when they regret it, and certainly not when they're afraid of being alone. Nathan lowered his head. I understand. I hope you truly do, Evelyn said, because I didn't come back to play strong. I came back to live honestly. He turned toward the door, his hand on the handle, paused for a beat as if he wanted to say something else. Then he opened the door and left. Evelyn stood alone in the office, her breathing steady, not empty, not triumphant, just the closing of a chapter that had stayed open too long. Her phone vibrated. A short message. Caleb, dinner tonight? If you're free. Evelyn smiled and replied simply. Evelyn, yes, I'm free. She looked back at her desk. The numbers, the plans, a life continuing, not because someone chose her, but because she chose to move forward. Somewhere out there, Nathan was learning to accept a grown truth. Some people are not meant to return. They are the ones who force us to change and then move beyond our reach. As for Evelyn, she left the office as dusk washed the river in amber light. Each step light, steady, without looking back. She was no longer a substitute. She was a choice her own. Chicago opened that morning with soft, quiet sunlight, as if the city itself had decided to slow down alongside Evelyn Moore. She stood by the glass wall of her office, a steaming cup of coffee cradled in her hands. Below, the river reflected the pale sky. Bridges woke to sparse traffic. There was no longer a feeling of fighting to stay balanced. No heart racing to escape. Just a woman standing in her rightful place, fully aware of the value she created. The board meeting was surprisingly brief. Caleb Wright didn't open with praise, didn't frame the achievements in embellished language. He let the numbers speak first, let the results stand on their own. When the presentation concluded, he nodded toward Evelyn. The board has voted, Caleb said evenly, unanimously. There was no applause in that moment, no fireworks, just a sentence placed gently, yet with enough weight to shift the center of the room. Evelyn Moore, Vice President of Marketing. Evelyn breathed in, breathed out. She nodded. She felt it break open inside her. The joy ran deep, settling like groundwater. Quiet, steady. She thought of the nights when the lights never went off, the moments spent staring at data that seemed lifeless while wondering, how much farther can I go? Now the answer was clear, not because of the new title, but because of the road she had carved for herself. After the meeting, as the room slowly emptied, Caleb paused at the doorway. Congratulations, he said, just the two of them. Thank you, Evelyn replied, for believing. Because you deserved it, he said, as always. The evening came without any romantic agenda. No fine restaurant, no candles, no curated background music. Just the small kitchen of the new home they had recently moved into. The window cracked open, river air drifting in with the scent of water and distant lights. Evelyn stood at the counter, her hand resting on a cup of tea gone cold, a light sweater draped loosely over her shoulders. Caleb was washing dishes. The steady sound of running water was so ordinary it couldn't possibly be mistaken for a special moment. Are you tired? He asked, not turning around. A little, Evelyn said, but the good kind of tired. Caleb nodded. He turned off the water, dried his hands with a kitchen towel, then leaned back against the counter, the familiar posture of a man who didn't need to impress anyone in his own home. "I've been thinking about something," he said. Evelyn turned to him, not expecting anything specific, not guarding herself. "I think this life is good," Caleb continued slowly. "Not perfect, but good in a way that makes me unwilling to trade it." Evelyn smiled softly. "I feel the same." Caleb looked at her for a long moment, not weighing possibilities but confirming what was already clear. "I don't want there to come a day," he said, "when things get harder, busier, or less romantic than they are now, and I find myself wondering where I stand in your life." Evelyn set her cup down. "So," he continued, his voice low but steady, "I want to be clear from now on." Caleb walked to the drawer beside the kitchen counter. He didn't kneel. He didn't stage the moment. He simply opened it and took out a small box. So simple it could have been overlooked if one wasn't paying attention. He placed it on the table between them. "I'm not proposing to you," Caleb said. Evelyn blinked, caught off guard. "I'm asking," he corrected, "that we choose each other, not out of need, not out of fear of loss, but because life is better when we're in it together." He opened the box. The ring didn't sparkle loudly. It was minimal, clean-lined, exactly the kind Evelyn would choose, not meant to draw attention, but to last. "I don't need you to save me," Caleb said, "and I'm not here to save you. I just want to be the person beside you when we're both standing strong and willing to take responsibility for that choice." Evelyn didn't cry. She didn't tremble. Her heart opened in the quietest way, like the final room of a house being lit after years of standing unused. "I want to marry you," Caleb said simply, "not to begin a story, but to continue a life we've already built with care." A pause settled between them, not anxious, not tense. Evelyn stepped a little closer. She didn't reach for the ring. She didn't touch his hand. "I say yes," she said, "not because I need a place to land, but because I know this is where I want to stay." Caleb let out a long breath, as if finally setting down something he'd been carrying for a very long time. He slid the ring onto her finger. No rushed kiss, no tight embrace. They stood there in the softly lit kitchen, moisture still clinging to their sleeves, the city outside continuing its own rhythm, while their lives had just been deliberately chosen. Evelyn rested her forehead against his shoulder. Not a fairy tale, not a climax, but a decision mature enough to last a lifetime. The wedding took place on a late summer morning. No crystal ballroom, no hundreds of guests, just a small garden by the lake, soft white and blue flowers, wooden chairs arranged in a gentle arc. Sunlight filtered through the trees, scattering light across the ground. The music was a simple piano instrumental, unadorned, without a dramatic rise. Evelyn wore a simple, flowing white dress, her shoulders bare. Caleb wore a light suit, no tie. They walked toward each other without lengthy ceremony. Only those closest to them were there. Friends, a few colleagues who had become work family. The vows were brief. Caleb spoke first. "I choose you today, and tomorrow, and the day after that." Evelyn replied with a calm smile. "I choose to stay with you, as long as we both want to keep becoming better versions of ourselves." There was no burst of applause, only steady breathing, birdsong, the wind. When they exchanged rings, it didn't feel like marking an ending, only a beginning that had been carefully prepared. Later that afternoon, after the ceremony, they sat barefoot by the lake, their feet touching the grass. Friends laughed in the distance. The water rippled gently. "Do you regret anything?" Caleb asked softly. Evelyn tilted her head, thought, not for long. "No," she said, "because if I hadn't gone through everything I did, I wouldn't know how to choose correctly today." Caleb took her hand, didn't squeeze, just held it. A year later, Ashcroft Group continued to grow, not loudly but steadily. Evelyn led global strategy, yet always protected space for slow mornings and dinners without meeting agendas. Caleb listened as much as ever. They argued directly and honestly, then returned to the same table. Their happiness didn't resemble a fairy tale. There were no constant climaxes. It was consistency, waking up together, going off to their separate work days, meeting again at night, sharing the hardest truths before sharing the joyful ones. In the small house overlooking the river, Evelyn placed her ring on her desk every morning before starting work. A ritual reminder: I chose, and I was chosen. At the end of the day, when city lights flickered on, Caleb stood behind her, arms resting around her waist. Not possessive, just a steady anchor that had learned how to stand in the right place. Evelyn looked out at the city, her heart calm. Not a fairy tale, but real happiness, built with maturity, sustained by respect, and lived through choices repeated every single day.